Welcome back, and we do welcome back today Craig DeRoche. He is the president and CEO of the Family Policy Alliance, which is a national organization that works to advance faith, family, and parental rights through public policy and civic engagement. He previously served as Speaker of the House there in Michigan and as a frequent author, speaker, and commentator on cultural government and the role of faith in public life. We certainly honor his time to be with us today. He does have a website, familypolicyalliance.com. There it is, familypolicyalliance.com. There's a picture of the landing page there on the screen. Craig, good to see you again. How are you, friend?
It's great to see you, and what a privilege it is to be on your show.
Thanks for coming back. A lot going on. Hey, recently the Supreme Court said no to men playing or boys playing in girls' sports. That's a win, but is people paying attention to it?
I think it's animating America right now. I think people are paying attention to this, and I think that it's going to motivate a lot of people to get out to vote this year. This is about the dignity, value, and worth of every human being. This is about the civil rights of our girls, and the Supreme Court has spoken clearly, and about 80+% of Americans agree with the Supreme Court, well over 60% of Democrats, a similar number in the 80s with independents. And it really is about America's founding, 250 years of saying that we are created equal. And what this transgender movement is trying to say is that some people are more equal than others. And that's repulsive to Americans. So it's actually a really big deal, Perry, that's going on right now.
There was another win inside this case. I'm sure you watched it, maybe listened to even some of the verbal arguments. But the moment that they tried to insert the word trans, they were interrupted and they changed it to boys. They didn't want to use the word trans in the arguments. And so the defense came back and said, no, we're talking about boys playing in girls' sports. That was quite a change in the middle of that, don't you think?
It is, because it's a losing argument. And folks, it seems that our values as Christians, people talk about a pendulum swinging culturally. And our founder, Dr. James Dobson, and others talked about fighting back in the 70s, when this was probably only a decade or two into really an attack on Christianity, attack on our values, an attempt by our educational institutions to move us away from Jesus Christ and the truth. And people thought that, well, we lost those battles. It kept getting worse and worse. And then about a decade ago, same-sex marriage was still very unpopular, but the courts imposed that on the country and the states, and people thought, well, it's always just going to go one way. And I can tell you, in 2026 in the summer, it is not going that way anymore. People are rising up. They're pushing back against advertisers. They're pushing back against Hollywood. They're pushing back against the drug companies. They're pushing back most vociferously against the schools. And really the metaphor, the animating, as I say, cause, the cultural cause, is women's sports, where there's a lot of unanimity. It's not partisan. It's not restricted to just Christians. It's a shared values. It's a shared love for America. It's a shared love for equality that is bringing people out right now and speaking up like Sophie Cunningham did in the WNBA. She's not even a political person, but she was able to articulate her values on this issue very clearly.
Boy, did she ever. Is this going to revitalize Title IX?
God willing, it will. The civil rights victories of the 60s and this one in the 70s, a carryover, were about eliminating discrimination based on sex and gender and race, and to give everybody an equal shot. They were perverted, I would say, by the evil one, and people that, as Bob Dylan, the great theologian of that era, would say, you got to serve somebody, right? You're one or the other. And so we saw with the Voting Rights Act, that was used to create black districts, right, to discriminate based on race. The Supreme Court got rid of that. Title IX was meant to level the playing field, literally, for girls' sports. There was only 250,000 girls playing in high school sports to well over 2 million, I think 2.5 million boys in the early 70s. Now they're on par with each other. So the evil one doesn't like that kind of equality. He doesn't like everybody being treated equally. So it's been an attack on Title IX itself, where Joe Biden, in the most perverse way, actually tried to just unilaterally remake the words within Title IX so they conform to this radical LGBTQ ideology.
Do you think this will carry over into the Olympics?
I think that it will. I think that these are, I'm getting a little bit older. I was a Speaker of the House, so you say that was 22 years ago in Michigan now that I was Speaker of the House. So I've seen some of these things ebb and tide, and I know the difference between something that lasts for an election cycle and changes back when power changes over. This is 100-year victory for the Lord and for our women and our girls. You had to take the UPenn president, who wrote a handwritten apology to their women's swimming team for how they are treated in the locker room and being denied their spot on the team for boys. That's a liberal, woke, leftist socialist, for all I know, writing handwritten apologies. That's what my old boss, Chuck Colson, would call restorative justice. I don't think they're coming back from this, and I think it is going to really be a larger part of this 2026 election than people are predicting right now. I think that a lot of the Republicans are just holding their discussions on it until after Labor Day, when people start paying attention again.
One other little question here that has to be addressed as it relates to this. Since the Supreme Court came out with this ruling, in particular, the governor of California, Governor Newsom, basically has thumbed his nose at it and said, no, we're going to do elsewhere. So this brings up the question, the consequences of breaking a Supreme Court ruling. Doesn't seem to be any.
Well, I think that it's going to be much larger than anything that we could do punitively to a governor. I think it's the destruction of the entire platform for a couple generations of politicians that are still in office from age 80 down to even their late 20s that are taking very strident positions of this radical LGBTQ ideology that 80% of America doesn't want, recognize it as discrimination, recognizes dehumanizing girls and women, and it's on tape. As the rising generation says, they're providing the receipts. I kind of actually like that analogy. And I think people are going to look back at this like they look back at segregationist Democrats, a few years later, and said, you're disqualified. We don't want to hear from you ever again. We wish you well. We can try to bring you toward Jesus, but you've really disqualified yourself from being a participant in this. But with Gavin Newsom, I'm not naive, Perry. I know exactly what he's doing, and I even would posit a theory as to why.
Okay, so obviously this ruling gives hope and puts things back into hopefully a level playing field. How are you helping parents navigate through these waters when these kids are just pounded with this stuff in public life or in public school?
So Family Policy Alliance is an alliance of 40 state organizations that employ over 400 people. And we do it through public policy at the local and the state level. I get to lead the national effort where we're trying to get Congress to codify these things. And policy is where this begins, taking the filth, the pornographic, almost stuff out of the books, not allowing the indoctrination, the postulation of children as early as kindergarten on these ideas, and respecting the dignity, value, and worth of every individual child. Your child is just as important as anybody else's, and part of what they should be entitled to is a childhood free of adults trying to sexualize them and reduce their value in the ways that they're doing. So we have tools. And it starts at Family Policy Alliance with mobilization. More Christians just don't vote in elections as much as even welfare or Medicaid recipients. A George Barna study demonstrated that this year. So what we're trying to make the story at Family Policy Alliance this year, when they look back at this election, is what happened? Why were there so many Christians that didn't vote for 50, 60 years now suddenly willing to show up at the polls and flood them. We're seeing an actual upswing right now and a revival of sort, not only in our faith, but people willing to take that action of stewardship over the blessing of the government that God has given us all, whether it's our local, our state, and our federal government. They're all owned by us. We're Caesar, so we can't pass it off to other people. We actually have to participate, and Family Policy Alliance makes that easy. When people just join us, we remind them to vote, we educate them on how to vote. We don't even tell them who to vote for. We just help people turn out in the polls, and it's transforming America.
All right, that's encouraging. So you're actually seeing an increase of Christians voting, because here in Oregon, we track those numbers really closely. And I have to tell you, if Christians who are eligible to vote would register and then vote, there isn't an issue or a candidate we couldn't sway in this state, but we're doing really hard work to get 40% to do that.
And I'll tell you what, to the Christians that are listening right now, this is a stewardship issue. The master gave you a bag of gold, bag of talents. It is your local school district. Doesn't matter if you're homeschooling. It's your money that is being used for the rising generation. And what do you want them to learn? You're responsible for that. You have to participate because you're already participating. You're already funding it, and you are the boss there. With that message, Perry, we're seeing people then coming forward and saying, well, I never thought of it that way. I was trying to just say Jesus will fix it when he comes back. Well, what about these kids that are being sexualized? We should care enough about them and their dignity and their value and their worth to stand up for them. So it's a call to arms. We are making it easy by educating. What it turns out, people that didn't understand how to vote. And you go to what you said about Oregon. Folks, there isn't a place in America, if the Christians register and vote, that would not be completely in line with our values. We have the numbers. We just have not participated. In Texas, there was this woke little school district that was a town of 12,000 people, and they decided their school board by an average of 1,000 voters, and it got more woke and more woke and more dangerous for little girls and kids with this sexual content. And some churches started talking about it, and they had 8,000 Christians, 8,000, show up and vote. And that's what, so when we say at Family Policy Alliance is we want to make our voices so loud that they're impossible to ignore, they're too loud to ignore, and that the changes we put in place last for generations, not just an election cycle. Those 8,000 people now voting in that town of 12,000 people can actually change the school district for decades to come. So we want to make that easy for you. We want you to think of voting as a healthy habit, because guess what? You own that school district wherever you live in Oregon, and even the governorship, and the majorities in the state legislature are not out of reach in Oregon. They would actually be easy to do if the churches start reminding people to vote.
Craig, do you think public education is salvageable?
Well, I think that public education is salvageable in some measure, but I think that the cleanest and the easiest way for us to do this is to go to the per pupil funding for the parents. The parents are the ones that pay the taxes, and the grandparents, the other people in the community. Investing in education is a noble and worthy investment for a culture to do. But what we should stop doing is having it as a monopoly that's been taken over by the evil one and these world policies. And to the issue of whether or not public education is salvageable, it would be hard for a little homeschool group of people to educate, say, a blind or a deaf person. Right. There's a lot of public service that we could do in transportation for people that have other physical disabilities. I think the parents, when they get their choice, they can choose off of a shelf, so to speak, of options of what to do. And I think the public would be able to serve them with things, reading and writing and arithmetic come to mind. If the public school says, well, what are we going to do? We can't, get in this weird woke sexualization of your kids. Why don't you teach them math? Why don't you teach them how to read? AI is like a typewriter. It's a neat tool, but it really is only powerful and works well if the kid actually knows how to write first.
Yeah. All right, let me take a quick break. Check out the website, familypolicyalliance.com. They are frontline warriors for you. Check them out. Support them. familypolicyalliance.com. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. An honor to have back with us today Craig DeRoche. He's the president and the CEO of the Family Policy Alliance, which is an amazing organization nationwide. You can go to their website and certainly be educated and informed, but more importantly, be involved and support them. familypolicyalliance.com. We're talking about the recent Supreme Court case that pretty much has said no, transgender students cannot play, basically boys playing in girls' sports. This is a huge win. But Craig, I want to ask you this question. How do we say no to a trans person? No, you can't, as a male, you can't play in women's sports. But at the same time, not turn them off to the message that we really want them to hear?
That's a great question, Perry, and thank you for asking that. When I was in junior high school, I put alcohol in my locker that I stole from my dad, who was an alcoholic that always had a lot laying around. I bought drugs from the drug dealers in junior high school forward. I was trying to solve a problem. Alcohol and drugs weren't my problem. They were my solution. So what we need to do when you recognize that somebody has something that they're using as a solution, other kids choose sex, violence, you name it, that is going to hurt them and potentially hurt others. It's our duty as Christians to demonstrate and shine Jesus' light. And we should love them equal. What they're doing, I'm not better than them because I chose a different thing to get drunk and high. They're choosing to change their gender. So we should recognize who you're talking with. We should speak to them about their dignity, their value, and their worth, and let them know that the actual problem that they're wrestling with, probably to the extent if you have a personal relationship with them, is fear and self-centeredness is where it comes from. Anger, resentment, shame, guilt, things like that. And that Jesus Christ is the answer, that he can set you free and you wouldn't have to change your gender. You wouldn't have to use intoxicating drugs. You wouldn't have to do sex, violence, all these other things. So it's a wonderful evangelical opportunity. And again, that's part of our cultural change, that since the baby boomers rising up through the 50s and 60s of their young adulthood were told you're not supposed to talk about your values in public. That was just a ploy by the evil one to say, take Jesus' light and take it off of the table and put it underneath it. But this is a wonderful opportunity for us to speak into the culture and let people know this. And the more conversations I have with people that way, even the most radical leftists, you can tell they're like, I need that peace and I need that freedom in my own life. Where does it come from again? It comes from Jesus Christ. And it's a wonderful opportunity for us to share. But sometimes you have to be humble. You have to talk about maybe some of your own failings so they recognize that you're not trying to condescend and say that they're of less value to you or that you're living your life better than them. And that's a way to connect as well.
That's very well said. Thank you. Do you think that the push of this agenda in public education, it seems like we deal more with issues of sex than we do history, math, everything else. Somehow this whole sexual revolution is now at the top of the education. Is it intentional? Why is it there?
Is it intentional? What's the first thing in Genesis that the evil one is doing, as far as the story goes? It's the people at Lot's door. And throughout the Bible, that's what people descend into the quickest. When Moses goes up the hill for a while, when things are going wrong, what Paul writes about in some of the communities that he was reaching out to. So some people say there's sex and then there's everything else, right? People, it's the first thing that you can get wrong. And you do things like intoxicating drugs, you do things like gambling. For me, that they may not penetrate your soul. that very first time, but sex seems to. It's the way that the Bible talks about it, and it's the evil one by his design, where he spends a lot of time manipulating. And where did Jesus first expose himself? To a woman at the well that was afflicted with sex, not as her problem, but she was using sex as her solution with five husbands and then another one. And he said, listen, if you take my water, you're not going to need that solution ever again. Right. Sex is a blessing from God, just like wine is, but you've got to recognize that it can afflict you, that what the devil tries to do is to use these things, and sex is available to everybody. Wine isn't, and so I think the evil one has been focused there since the days of Lot, and probably well before that. It seemed like their behavior in that story was common, the way it's described, not shocking to Lot at the time. He was just trying to deal with a situation that maybe he was aware of.
That's great. I've had Dr. Barter on quite a few occasions. He's really interesting, especially with some of his recent research showing that the bad part of it is that only 4% of Christians in the United States have a biblical worldview, which is not a good number. But on the other hand, looking back, there is seemingly an interest among young males looking to faith and turning to faith. Do you think there is a genuine renewal or even a revival of traditional family values?
I know that there is one going on, and I just had my second daughter get married a week ago, and I see it from her and I see it from her friends. My youngest daughter, who's 19, she has a Sunday small group. In small groups, when I was a kid, were like 6 or 7 people, There's over 500 people that come out on Sunday night for a small group, and it's like 2.5 hours, not 20 minutes. And they're celebrating, and I think they've been isolated and they've been lied to so much. I joke about my childhood. They just lied to us about what happened in a nuclear war. You got to get under your desk at school. The rising generation has been lied to about science, about medicine, about food. They've been lied to about sex. They've been lied to about their own value and dignity by the adults. And the adults, the whopper that the adults that are over 30 are coming out with right now is we're trying to tell them that we've got this next big thing that's a widget, and we call it artificial intelligence. And now they're smart enough to say, you all are stupid because you're calling your own intelligence artificial, and they're asking the right question. So where does the actual intelligence come from? Where is actual wisdom to be found? Where is truth? And it's bringing them right back to the Bible and the source of truth for myself and Family Policy Alliance. We have not deviated at all with our statement of faith since Dr. Dobson founded us. And now that's the main selling point, instead of what maybe 20 years ago people said, get with the times. Now the rising generation is attracted to us because of it.
Do you think the American church is ready for these young people to come in?
That's a great question. I love being on this show, by the way, Perry. Thank you for having me on. The American church as it currently exists is not prepared, but the church, the small c church, is forming up in such a dynamic way with home churches like that small group. Probably at least a couple hundred people there are seekers of that age. They just want to be around their friends, and they want to worship, and they want to talk about God, and they want to get lessons. The person that runs it is in a recovery for pornography, and that relates to people. They want to learn how Jesus set him free from that. A lot of young men suffer from that. A lot of young men are getting snared by online gambling, and it's bringing them in. I think a lot of the older, in a more traditional, even the non-denominational evangelical movement would say, we'd rather not talk about that stuff. Well, folks, by the time somebody's 25 years old, they've been drenched in a really dark sexual, culture that's drenched in gambling and pornography and everything else. And they're ready to talk about it. They're ready to hear how Jesus overcame it. And all those stories, everything I just said, are in the scripture. It's okay. And because they want to be set free, and they want to know where they might be able to find peace versus what is being advertised to them right now today.
It's wonderful. Thank you for your time, Frank. Good to see you, and thank you for your work. Thanks for being a frontline warrior. Let me say to our viewers and listeners, go to familypolicyalliance.com. There's the picture of that landing page. It's a great resource. Support them, pray for them. They're on the front line doing great things for you and your family. Thank you, Craig. Good to see you, buddy. Stay in the fight.
Thank you. God bless.
You too.